Now I will do a small demonstration on how to use openEHR queries to query different EHRs to get clinical documents with certain criteria, certain filters, and we will use for the filters SNOMED expressions. So we will mix openEHR queries with SNOMED expressions, and we will see what we can do and how this mechanism is really powerful to query EHRs and get clinical documents with certain conditions, certain medications, certain diagnoses, procedures, etc. So what I will do is I will create, this is the EHRServer. I have it running on my virtual machine here. It is already loaded with some EHRs and some sample data. I will create a new query. Yeah, and this query will be to get clinical documents. So I'll select composition from there, and will be clinical documents that will have a diagnosis that is any type of diabetes. So any type of diabetes. Sorry that the interface is in Spanish because I had this demo prepared in Spanish, but I will go through all the details. So don't pay attention to the text on the user interface. Just follow the demo. First, I need to select the openEHR template that contains the definition of some clinical documents, and I will select the encounter that has a diagnosis inside, and the diagnosis is represented, the diagnosis structure that records the data is represented by this evaluation archetype, and that evaluation archetype defines a lot of data points. The data point that contains the diagnosis is this one, that is coded text. So since we have codes there, we can query by those codes. So here I can define the criteria. So here I am really defining the filter for using the definition of the diagnosis, and that will give me the result when I execute the query. That will be, I don't know, maybe all the documents that have a diagnosis, and the diagnosis is equals to this specific code that is SNOMED CT concept ID. Yeah, the SNOMED terminology works with concept IDs. Or I can select another operator that is in list, so it will be one of these three codes. So if these are fake ones, if the diagnosis on any document on an EHR matches with one of these three codes, SNOMED codes, it will be returned in the query results. But what we want to do is to use this new operator, the in SNOMED expression. This allows us to do a lot of things using SNOMED expressions. So the basic structure of the query and the criteria is all based on openEHR definitions, archetypes, and templates. And this part of filtering very granular, very specific information is based on the knowledge that SNOMED has and the power of the SNOMED expressions to use that knowledge contained in the SNOMED terminology. So here I have a code. That code is associated with the concept of diabetes mellitus. Yeah, and this operator here means that this will match any type, any child or descendant of diabetes mellitus. That is the most generic concept of diabetes. Yeah, so this will match all the types of diabetes that exist. And if you check the SNOMED terminology, you might find more than 20 or 30 types of diabetes there. Yeah, so with this button, what we do is we validate the expression is correct. in terms of the syntax. And here, to validate, we are using a service from Veratech. So what I will do here is to add the criteria to the query. So this is the concept of diagnosis, the path that is associated with the name, the specific problem that is diagnosed, that is a coded text, and the SNOMED expression, the criteria, the condition, the filter will be that the code of that diagnosis will be in the SNOMED expression any child or descendant of diabetes mellitus. Yeah, and the terminology will be SNOMED. And I can test if this matches any clinical documents in my EHRServer. So what I selected here is the return format. It can be XML or JSON. JSON is more readable. Here I can filter by EHR, but if I don't select any EHRs, it will be query all the EHRs in the database that I have access to. Yeah, so I will click just in execute, and it will take some time to execute and will return some results. So the results are ready, and these are the IDs of the EHRs, and inside of them there is a list of matching clinical documents. And this is not the full clinical document. This doesn't have the content of the clinical document, but it's a reference to the clinical document that matches with my condition, has a record of diagnosis that is any type of diabetes. So here we have a lot of power. We can use the SNOMED expressions to have really granular way of filtering based on clinical document definitions from openEHR. And this is the ID of the clinical document. And if I want to get the specific clinical document, I can use the REST API and send this ID, and it will return the content of the document. Also, I can change here this value from no to yes to, instead of return a pointer to the clinical document, it will return the whole clinical document in the result. And this is what the client applications will see from the REST API when this query is executed. Yeah, it's the same structure that I have here. So I will create this query so everything looks okay. This will create the query in the database. So we don't need to write SQL code or recompile the application to create queries. So we create queries from the query builder interface that I show you. So I will create another query. I will go, we have our query, any type of diabetes here. I will create another query just for fun that will show a more complex expression. This will be respiratory tract infections caused by a virus. So I want all the clinical documents that have a diagnosis inside. So this part is the same, this part is the same. I will select in SNOMED expression, and the SNOMED expression that I will use is this. And look at this. This is very powerful. This has a lot of knowledge just in one line. Yeah, this is all the descendants of a respiratory infection. Yeah, so we have all the types of respiratory infection here, filtered by the cause. This is the attribute of cause, and this is the value for virus. So this is filtering all the respiratory infections by the cause. Yeah, so we can validate this expression. That looks okay. Also changing the output format, I will test this. The test will be the same as I did before, and click, and we have results. It's very quick, and the same will be returned from the REST API. So everything looks okay. So I will create this query. I forgot to add the criteria. Yeah, so I forgot to add the criteria here. So I will test again. So first I did the execution for an empty criteria. So now we have the matching criteria for the respiratory infection. So everything looks okay. I will create this, and I will create a couple of more queries just for fun. These two are based on the diagnosis, and the diagnosis that is already called in SNOMED CT. And now I will create a demographic query. I can create, I don't know, maybe I want all the EHRs of the males that are older than 40 years old, something like that. So for that, what we have is a demographic template that contains some basic demographic data, that is the gender or the sex and date of birth. So for the gender, I will select that is equals to masculine. This is in Spanish, and these codes are defined in the template, really, in the demographic template. And the date of birth, I will check this special function that gives the date in years, and that will be greater than, as I said, 40 years old. So this will give me the date in years, and that should be greater than 40. Good. And if I test this, result JSON, on all the EHRs, I will get all the EHRs that have one clinical document that has the sex of the patient being male, and the date of birth is older than 40 years old. Yeah, and since these are documents that are persistent, there is just one document per EHR. So with this, we know a little bit about the patient, and will be just one document per EHR. So all the EHRs matching here are for male patients. We know that, yeah, and older than 40. So we can create this. Perfect. And I will create another query based on weight control. So I will say I want obese or worst. I will get all the clinical documents that have a record of obesity or worst. So I can use the weight control template, and here we have the body mass index, and here is the data point for the body mass index, and I can say this is greater than 30. I think from 30 and above, the person is considered to be obese. Yeah, and we have the units here, that is kilograms per meter square, and that looks okay. I will add the criteria. So we are getting documents that have a record of weight and height. When the body mass index is calculated, it is more than 30. That is overweight, obese, or worst. Yeah, and here we have all the clinical documents that matches that criteria. Yeah, so I will create this query, and we can do some interesting stuff. If I create a group here, I will create a query group. Just test queries. We need to add these queries to that group. This will be just 1 second. I will just edit each query and add it to that group. I want to show you. I will update that. Assign that to the group. Update this. And to show you how some quick indicators can be calculated really easy from these queries. So what we should have is all these queries inside a group, and I can now execute the account. This will be a quick count, so it will execute and stop executing, and these are the counts of all the EHRs that contain one document that matches the criteria. At least one document that matches the criteria. So we know that for obesity or worse, we have more than 300. We have males older than 40. We have 166. We have documents with diagnosis of respiratory infection caused by virus, 33, and documents with diagnosis, any type of diabetes, 230. So we have some quick indicators just by creating these queries. And it was like a minute or so to create each query, so very quick. And what I can do with these queries, we can execute each query from the REST API, or we can go to, and we can get these quick indicators. That is very useful. You can get quick information from your patients, so your patient base, the patients that are associated with your organization. Or I can create a mix of queries from these EHR queries. So I can select many of the queries that I created. So I can select males older than 40 that are also obese or worse, and that have any type of diabetes. So this will be diabetes, male, older than 40, and obese or worse. So this query, what it will do is will check for EHRs that have any document that matches my criteria, and will merge will really intersect the results for each of the 3 queries that I selected, and will return a list of EHRs that match the 3 criteria. So I can execute this from here, and this will be able to be executed via the REST API. And these are the EHRs from my base. I have 44 that have any type of diabetes, that are male older than 40, and that have a record of being obese or worse. Yeah. There's one thing that should be considered for the obesity record, is that we can have older records of obesity, and the person can be without overweight right now. So we will add in the future a date range filter here on this screen, so we can check for records, I don't know, for the last year or for the last month, something like that. So we know that the person will be almost the same weight, yeah, because a person that is has severe obesity won't change much in some months or a year or so. Yeah, but in some cases it can happen. But here we have a quick result, and we can use this result to, we can invite these people because they are obese and have diabetes. So we have risk factors there, and we have that the person is older than 40. We might have those factors consider, maybe to invite each patient of this list to participate on a weight control program, or to control the diabetes in combination with the weight control, etc. And we can, after that, check how those patients evolve, yeah, based on those health problems, yeah, and conditions. So this is basically it. We can create queries in a second. We can execute those queries. We can get some indicators back very quick, and we can mix those queries to create a filter for EHRs, really, and to select patients. We can also use this to select patients to participate on clinical trials. Very easy, because we can set or change the condition for the diagnosis to be a certain type of cancer, maybe, and we are trying to test medication for a specific type of cancer for a specific population. So we can do those queries by mixing more simple queries, and we can use SNOMED to have filters over the specific conditions and health problems and types of cancer, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, so we can do that. Also, we can filter by medications, maybe by medications that they were already taken or are taken right now. Yeah, we can filter by those, and we can combine those queries with these queries, demographic queries, etc., etc., etc. So we can do that very easily, and that is the power of implementing two standards in one querying mechanism. Yeah. And this all can be executed from the REST API, and you will get the same results from the REST API. So you can connect really any kind of client application with this and have the power of this kind of clinical data querying in your application. And that's it from me. If you have any questions, you can write on the comments. Bye-bye.